Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Moms. This is Dorothy Pilarski, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of you that are signing on to today's fantastic Midday Moms interview with a remarkable author and speaker. I'd like to welcome Leila Miller. And Leila, where are you from? I didn't even ask you exactly where you're from.
So I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and so hot desert climate, and I'm pretty much a native Arizonan. So it's
okay, good.
So good to be here with all the Canadians.
Yeah, and we do have actually quite a few moms that join us from different states. And for those of you that are signing on, I always encourage you, if you would, in the chat box to say hello, to tell us where you're from. Hi, Claude. Claude, where are you from? I always love telling everyone that Claude is actually from Dubai, and she's a regular that attends our sessions. So we're really hoping that she'll start a Catholic Moms group in Dubai. Nelsie, one of our Mothers Group leaders from St. Benedict's in Milton. Welcome, Nelsie, a very important team member in our ministry. So some of you know about our ministry, some of you don't know about our ministry. Maybe some of you are here for the very first time. Again, my name is Dorothy Pilarski. I'm the founder of a ministry. I always say it's 3 words, really easy. Google it. CatholicMomsGroup.com, CatholicMomsGroup.com. We are faith partners with the Archdiocese of Toronto, and we are on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood. And we do so primarily by helping parishes start Catholic moms groups. We have helped start about 55 Catholic moms groups so far. We started, first of all, in the Archdiocese of Toronto. COVID pandemic turned out to be a bit of a blessing because then we put all of our materials online. And now we have Catholic moms groups in the North Pole, in Minnesota, in Mississippi, in Ohio. So it's just been a real exciting development. So a big warm, Tara Barco, hi from Our Lady of Peace. Anya Vilkovsky from Kitchener, a big warm hello. Very excited to see you here. I'm going to take a few minutes now just to show the ministry video because we are hoping to start more Catholic moms groups, and we hope that you're going to be inspired by today's interview and that you're going to say, yes, I'm putting my stake in the ground at my parish. I'm going to go on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood, and I am going to start a Catholic moms group. So be patient with me as I screen share, because sometimes there's a little bit of learning that I'm still doing. Here we go. Come, Holy Spirit. There we go. Here is our ministry video.
Mothers, by our very nature, we are nurturing, loving caregivers. We are social beings, made for friendship and community. We are also spiritual by nature, made by a loving God to know Him and love Him, and to pass this love of our Catholic faith on to our children. But right now, many mothers feel overextended, distracted, and exhausted. Though as Catholics, we have the community of our church, many mothers attending Mass could not name the moms sitting next to them in the pew they share. Community and support among Catholic mothers is desperately needed in this hectic and chaotic culture. Your parish needs you to bring these moms together.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Pilarski. I'm the founder of Catholic Moms Group. We at Catholic Moms Group are on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood. We exist to bring together like-minded, faith-filled mothers who crave community and are focused on spiritual growth, Catholic teaching, and fellowship. Can you imagine a thriving, engaged mothers group at your parish, a group of moms in love with their Catholic faith, ready to serve other mothers no matter what stage of motherhood they're at. Can you imagine what a difference that would make at your parish? Starting a mothers group, it's not rocket science, but working with a team who's done it before and who's done it dozens and dozens of times sure does help. The Catholic Moms Group membership site is an online community that offers training, resources, and dozens of tools for parishes to help them start a mothers group quickly and efficiently. We're here to provide you with a clear path to launching a Catholic Moms Group at your parish. All of our materials are 100% Catholic. We have clearly laid out meetup plans for both moms groups and toddler groups. We are obedient to the magisterium of the Catholic Church. We have created dozens of tools that are going to save you time and energy. And besides that, we love our Blessed Mother. We constantly turn to her for her intercession. You can make a huge impact in your parish, so join us. We are revolutionizing the way parishes start mothers groups by providing parishes with a Catholic mothers group starter kit and by nourishing and training a community of Catholic mothers group leaders across the world. It's time to start a mothers group at your parish. Join us today. So we are hoping that one of you here will feel the Spirit calling you to start a Catholic Moms Group. I have a great privilege and honor today to introduce you to Leila Miller. She is a revert to the Catholic faith. Her and her husband, Dean, have 8 children and several grandchildren. She worked in advertising before becoming a wife and a stay-at-home mom. She has been widely featured on Catholic television, radio, and in print. And her books, Primal Loss, The Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak, and Raising Chaste Catholic Men, and the book we will be talking about today, Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues and Seek to Apply the Church's Timeless Teachings on Marriage, Family, Moral Education of Children. Welcome, Leila.
Thank you, Dorothy. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is the topic that energizes me, so hopefully I won't go off too crazily as we talk.
Yeah, no, very, very happy that you're here. Again, you know, you've written an incredible book. There are so many hot topics in the book, from divorce, sex outside of marriage, contraception, abortion, IVF, pornography, transgender identity, and homosexuality. I want to congratulate you. You know, I want to congratulate you for just having the courage to take this on. You know, I'm just getting ready to, you know, purchase a case of these books because it's the book I always dreamed that I'd find. And, you know, taking on all of those topics is a remarkable act of courage. Can you tell me a little bit about how the idea came to you to write the book, and you know, a little bit more about maybe Trent Horn? How did this book come to be?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question, and it's kind of hits on what you said, which is there's nothing out there to help adults, mothers, you know, and fathers, grandparents talk to kids these days about these hot button moral issues that are so difficult and so entrenched, and they're coming at us from every angle. And there was really nothing out there that just, in a simple way, in a way that everybody can understand and learn, presented ways to talk to your kids about this, no matter their age. For example, well, we have 10 topics, 10 specific topics, so each section. is dealing with a specific moral issue. And all of these just happen to touch on kind of what's exploding in the world right now, which is all these, the use and misuse of human sexuality and the way that we're made. So for example, every section, let's say it's the section on transgenderism or something. The first chapter, again, very easy to read. My whole thing is I need things to be simple for me. So I assume other moms are harried and we're tired and we need something to be very simple. So the first chapter in each of those topics would be what the church teaches. So that's just a way to get ourselves acclimated to, well, okay, this is what the church teaches on transgenderism or abortion or contraception or IVF or whatever. Then the next chapter is how to speak to little kids about this issue. So it gives you an idea of how do I approach in an age appropriate way, because the church is very specific that we do not expose little children to sexual issues right before they are ready. That's called a latency period, and we don't want to mess with that. But how do we, now that the world has kind of exploded with all these sexual issues, how do we talk to little children, prepubescent, on that particular topic? Then the last chapter in each topic or section is how do we speak to post-pubescent or teenagers about that particular topic as well. So it's very age appropriate. It's very cut and dry, easy to follow. There are some sample, conversations in there as well. And I've raised most of my kids to adulthood so far, and I have, the 13th grandchild is on the way. I still have 3 minors at home. My youngest is 12. So I started raising kids. My first daughter was born in 1991. She's 30. There was no, the kids' shows didn't have LGBT themes in them. There wasn't any of this stuff out there yet. Gay marriage in America didn't even come officially till 2015. So I've raised what I consider to be 2 shifts of children, pre all this stuff where the culture was still pretty okay. And then now. So we really,
yeah, so I think this is a really important sort of point that you're making. Like number one, I don't know if everybody heard, but Leila is a mother of 8 children. And how many grandchildren?
Numbers 12 and 13 are on the way. So
you have a tremendous amount of experience. And I think you and I know that there's sort of like no magical, mystical parenting practices, but that there ought to be a difference between how we communicate with young toddlers to how we communicate with teenagers. So can you tell us a little bit more, like distinguish between the 2 periods there that you were just beginning to reference? Because I think that right now we live in this culture where we're wanting to expose our children to everything as soon as possible and to explain everything as soon as possible, rather than to be guarding our children, right? Like I remember even when, 9/11 was, all over television. Well, I wasn't putting my toddlers in front of the exploding buildings, whereas I saw a lot of moms were. So can you talk a little bit about the, need to protect and nurture versus the need to debate and discuss and reason, and when those ages might be, when are those ages and when do they start and finish and things like that?
Yes, and I'm going to quote St. John Paul II on this, who was very clear about the latency period. And the latency period is also what he called the age of innocence. And that is from the age of toddlerhood to about puberty. And those years, children should be able to be children. They should be, physically and theoretically and figuratively unmolested. I mean, they should not be having to deal with any type of explicit or overt sexuality talk. They shouldn't know the details of sex. They shouldn't be exposed specifically. This is something unheard of prior to just the last few years, but they should never be exposed to any discussion of homosexuality, for example. Now, I know everybody's probably going, well, how is that even possible? If you go to the document from the Pontifical Council for the Family called The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality, and I believe that came out in 1995, You can print it out. You can print it out on your, and I recommend that you do, and get a yellow highlighter and start reading it. It's several pages long, but it's guidance for parents about how to talk to children on human sexuality in the home. And one thing that it says in that document, and again, this was only in 1995, that discussion of things like homosexuality should not even be broached until they hit puberty, unless it is unavoidable for some reason. Now, of course, we've reached a point in the culture where it's kind of unavoidable, but we're still supposed to protect our children from any sorts of deviation from God's plan for human sexuality. And that certainly would be a deviation, and what we used to call, again, forgive me, but we used to call it a perversion of sexuality. So we don't expose our children to that. That is immoral to actually openly expose your children to that. If there's a need to discuss it because of something that happened, maybe an uncle, has a husband, or maybe they saw something at school or on TV and it's unavoidable, you would then want to speak to them in the most guarded ways, but not get explicit with anything also. So again, this is church teaching, it's church understanding that we do not mess with the age of innocence of our children. And yes, it requires protection of the children. They will have enough time to be exposed to that later on when they're teens and adults, but we want to make sure that they're peaceful and secure and protected when they need to be, which is in their childhood.
Yeah, and so one thing that my mom used to stress a lot, and I don't know that it's getting stressed enough in our culture, and it's one of the reasons that our ministry exists, is that really, moms need to evaluate what their goals are as mothers, right? So if my goal is to create a happy and a holy childhood for my children, rather than to expose them to as much as possible, as soon as possible, that's gonna mean two different lives for me as a wife and mother. And that's one thing that we really, really, really want to stress. And I don't know if I said really, but that our duty as a Catholic mother is to create a holy and innocent childhood where the intimacy exists within the family and the mom and the dad and the siblings, and that, that the flower has room to bloom. Anyway, I'm just going to move a little bit forward because we've got a lot of questions here, and a big shout out and thank you to Tanya Lee, one of our Mothers Group leaders who helped in preparation for this interview. I know that in reading your book, Tanya had mentioned that you keep on kind of steering the reader back to moral law, and that you talk about natural law, moral law, God's law. Could you tell us a little bit more about what moral law is and what moms or what parents can do to reinforce it?
Yes, I get so excited about this. I want to hand all you moms your confidence. This is not brain surgery. This is why I keep coming back to. This is simple. We just were never taught this. What is the moral law? It is not complicated. The natural law is a term we use for the universal moral law. Okay, so this whole book that Trent Horn and and he's from Catholic Answers. He's a very excellent apologist, and he's also a dad. The moral law, the natural law, is the way that God made things to run. Okay, in his design. So we can see things have a design. Everything has a design. So even things that we create, let's start there. People create hairbrushes, they create computers, they create chairs and tables and toasters and clocks. Everything has a purpose. Another word for that is a telos. Everything has a design. If we use a thing according to its design, things generally go well. Things can thrive that way. If we use a thing against its purpose or against its design or against its order, the ordered use of it, things tend to fall apart. Again, you all know that this is not brain surgery. This is why I want to say it's quite easy to grasp this, and we've just never taught our children this. So let's say we use, you could talk to a little kid and say, what would happen if daddy put molasses in the car instead of gasoline? And a child would understand instantly, oh, that's so silly. That wouldn't work. It can't happen that way. It won't run. Exactly. So you teach your kids things like that. Just kind of get them acclimated to certain things are designed a certain way for a certain purpose. So natural law is, what is this thing and what is it for? What is it made for? And so just as people design things, you could teach your children young. God also designed things. God's the ultimate creator, right? I mean, we're just imitating him when we create things, but he created everything to begin with. He created us. He created the universe. He created the animals. But when he created us and the animals and the earth, he had a design in mind. And as long as we're using the things of the created world and our own bodies in the way that God designed us, we will thrive. We will tend to do well. And if we use our bodies or the things of the created world, if we use God's things the wrong way, things will tend to fall apart, or things will go wrong. And so there's a morality that's in that when we use our own bodies, that because we're rational, reasonable people, we can say, okay, we need to use our human sexuality in this way because that's the design. That's the way that God made us. So these things it's not brain surgery. We just have to look at how God designed us, look at how God designed the world and the moral world. And we all can come to these conclusions with use of human reason alone. And that's really important about natural law. And if you don't mind, I just want to differentiate. People think of natural law and they think the laws of nature. Well, no, we're not talking about science and like how gravity works. That's all very important, but we want to talk about the moral law and how we act. How are human beings supposed to act? And how are we supposed to know what to do and what not to do? So we're not talking, when we say natural law, we're not talking about laws of nature. We're not talking about what comes naturally to me. Like I may want to grab a whole bunch of cookies when I see them on a plate, and that might come naturally to me. But that's not when we talk about the moral law. That's not what we're talking about either. And we're also not talking about what comes naturally to animals, because people like to say, well, animals in nature, they have homosexual acts and things like that. It's like, well, that's not what natural law is either. We're talking about what is the moral law? What is it that every human being on the planet, whether they're an atheist, whether they're a Buddhist, whether they're a Christian, whether they're, a Catholic Christian, doesn't matter. What do we all know? What can we all understand with just our minds? And again, what can we all know? We know that stealing is wrong. Every culture knows that. Everyone, an atheist, can reason to that proposition, right? Everyone knows that murdering innocent people is wrong. You don't have to be a Catholic to know that. You can come to that from the light of human reason. And St. Paul even says that in his epistles, where he says, we can look at creation and we can know what the moral law is. It's written in our hearts. So the whole book is based on, this is not rocket science. We can figure this out. And your kids were literally made to figure this out. Truth is something that they were made to understand. And as long as we're teaching them simple truths about how things were made and how to act as moral agents, as people, as human beings between each other and among each other, they're going to be more peaceful, more ordered, and they're going to have a happier life. And most importantly, they're going to end up in heaven. So that's the basis for each of these things that we go through, each of these tough moral issues, is just how God made us. We've deviated from this idea of natural law recently, but it's actually even the basis of the Nuremberg trials and how people were convicted when they were Nazis. It goes to the founding of America. It's based in natural law and the laws of God. So we've got to get back to that. And the church traditionally has used natural law as the way that we teach the faith. So we need to get back to it. And that's what we're doing in this book.
Yeah, and a shout out to all moms. As moms, we need to reclaim our confidence in speaking about some of these things, because I think, like one of the moms in my mom's group once said that if a mother at her own kitchen table is afraid to declare the truth, and if a mother at her own kitchen table is afraid to, call a sin and to teach the Catholic faith, our culture is in serious, serious trouble. You know, it used to be, quote unquote, the mom that would say to her husband, okay, well, maybe you're drinking too much. You need to get, you know, back on track, or, you know, we need to get to mass. Like the mom used to be the moral compass in the old days. And so we're shouting out to moms, we need you to build that confidence. Now, Leila, one of the things that you mentioned in your book, Made This Way, is that the biggest trap that Catholics fall into is talking about, you know, when it comes to, you know, same-sex marriages, you know, why we're against it, why we don't believe in it. And you stress that the dialogue should in fact be, what is marriage? Can you tell us a little bit about, well, maybe some of us here are in the dark about what, you know, what is marriage and how can we get the conversation back on track?
Right. And it's very hard when we're living in a certain era and all we know is what's swirling around us. It's hard to take ourselves out of that era and realize this is a point in time. But for all of history prior to 5 seconds ago, historically speaking, marriage wasn't seen as it is now in our culture. There was a shift in right around the time of the sexual revolution, where previously, again, natural law would tell us what is marriage. Okay, marriage is a bride and a bridegroom. It's always been that way. Again, whether it was religious cultures, atheistic cultures, you always had a bride presupposes a bridegroom, and they would be brought together in a lifelong permanent union that would be consummated. Okay, you'd have to have a consummation, because even in any secular, you could still get a secular civil annulment if the marriage was never consummated, if the two people never had sexual relations. It wasn't even considered, you know, you could get out of it as being a non-marriage because it hadn't happened. Consummation had to happen, and children were the result of this union. And the reason marriage existed was so that society could raise up children with a mother and a father to have a stable and healthy, thriving society with citizens that were healthy and thriving. And so there was this, and that's always been the teaching of the church as well. You know, you get married in order to procreate and educate your children. You love each other, of course, but the procreation and education of children were always very much, you know, the primary ends of marriage. And then there was this shift in the culture with the sexual revolution, which started to make, instead of an objective reason for what God created in the garden, because he created marriage as the very first human relational thing he ever created, male and female, and be fruitful and multiply. There was this shift in the 1960s to change it from objective reality to feelings and desires. And again, you can see kind of where Satan can get in, because as soon as you get into feelings and desires rather than objective reality and truth, you go wonky. So you've got this idea now that marriage is about a romantic feeling. And it's not really about children. I mean, children, you know, you can have children if you want, but it's about the two people having this romance, this feeling of love, and it's an emotion, and it makes you feel good. And this person is supposed to fulfill your emotional needs forever, you know, until death or until you divorce if they stop fulfilling your needs. That shift is huge. So it takes it from the societal and child rearing union of marriage to the romance version of marriage. Completely different things. So if you ask someone what is marriage, and I've done this many, many times over the years, and if they're let's say pro gay marriage, they can't give you a definition of something that couldn't also be used for, let's say, a little league team, or two sisters deciding to retire and live together in an apartment, or I mean, everything they say, it's not about the conjugal union that can only be had between a man and a woman who can produce children. Even if they can't produce children, even if they're infertile, it's ordered toward the production of children, which only God, you know, God's in charge of conception. So that part isn't ours to deal with. He opens and closes the womb. But you have to have a consummation. You have to have an ability to come together in this union that is unique among all other types of relationships. You can't have that with two men. You can't have that with two women. You simply can't. And one way that even I can prove to you that even the secular world knows that it's not the same thing is that in the UK, if you go on their website to how to annul a marriage, again, this is civil, we're not talking about religious annulments, how to annul a marriage, it will say what it always has, which is non-consummation. If you can't have sex, if it's not possible, or if you haven't done it, that can be a nullity. And then they have a little asterisk and a little parentheses that says, does not apply to same-sex couples. Oh, okay, wow, they're admitting this is not the same. These two things are not the same. We have different rules for marriage for husbands and wives than we do for gay couples. Why? Because they can't achieve what a marriage is. So we've had to almost carve out this exception because it's a different animal. So anyway,
Leila, I could probably speak
Oh,
to
I
you
could-
forever, and I'm
I know.
hoping that we can at one point have you fly down to Canada for a full day. Never mind this 1 hour on Zoom, and
Yes.
maybe a couple of different cities. Who knows? So let's just pretend I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. Let's pretend that your child who's in kindergarten comes to you and says, why can't girls marry girls? Like, what would you say?
Strangely enough, that actually happened to me. My youngest child was 5, and he came to me. At the time, he was in a public charter school, so it was not a Catholic school. But it could happen in a Catholic school, though, now, couldn't it? But he came to me. I was ladling him up some soup, and I have this story in the book. He was 5 in kindergarten, and he happened to have. There was a couple of girls there who had lesbian parents. And again, I eventually, the next year I had to move him out of the school completely because I didn't want to have to deal with, discussing these things. But he said to me one day, Mom, girls can marry girls. And he said it kind of matter-of-factly. And I was like, oh, so one thing you have to do as parents is you do not react. You have to be great actors and actresses, and you just have to be very calm. So I just kept fixing the soup and ladling the soup. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, where did you hear that? You ask a question, give yourself some time to, maybe freaking out inside, but do not react. Because then they'll never approach you again, right? Your kids will never approach you if they think that you're going to freak out if they talk or ask you questions. So he said, well, Katie told me, and it happened to be not the child of the lesbians, but just another child. Well, Katie told me. And I said, oh, okay. Well, Katie is such a sweet little girl, but Katie is wrong. Girls can't marry girls. Girls can't marry girls. God has designed it so that only boys can marry girls, and that there can be mommies and daddies for the babies. And isn't it sad? Wouldn't it be just so terribly sad for a child not to have a mommy, or for a child not to have a daddy? Because that's not the way God wants it. He wants you to have a mommy and a daddy. And he thought about it and he's like, yeah, you're right. And it was just that simple. I mean, he's 12 now. We never had another problem with it since. The fear is that people want to describe things and get into it. You don't have to. Again, remember, we're keeping them innocent at this age. We don't need to discuss sex. Doesn't need to be brought up. We just know that God designed that children should have a mommy and a daddy. And in fact, all children do have a mommy and a daddy. And if it doesn't work out that way, it's usually because someone has gone off doing their own thing and not what God wanted them to do.
Yeah, so I got just a quick little comment here. I know that at one of my mother's group meetups, one mom said something that, these mother's group meetups, sometimes a mom says something and it's like, boom, it hits me. And one mom said that one of the biggest mistakes that mothers make when they're mothering is to overreact in the moment.
Right.
And I was definitely one of those mothers, right? And I want to use this as a teaching moment to all of you, is that when you feel your kind of energy and emotions and passions rising, is in that moment to pray to the Holy Spirit. Because if you know that overreacting is going to cause damage, that might be motivation enough for you not to overreact, right? So that's a fruit of, hanging out with Moms Wiser. Just a very quick story. I used to host not only Moms Group, but I also hosted many girls clubs. And one girl called me, I don't know, I think she was 12 years old or something. She had been attending my my girls' club, and she says, you know, Mrs. McElroy, I want to talk to you. I said, okay, yeah, let's talk. I'm here. Let's talk. What's the? She goes, I think I might be gay. And I said, you're not. I said, you're wrong. And she was, I said, and I'm going to use a fake name here. I said, Maria, you know what? There is no such thing as a gay gene. So you don't have to worry that you have a gay gene in your body, because there is no gay gene. Sometimes when you're in puberty, you get confused and you get lots of emotions and you get really excited when you meet a new girlfriend because you have a lot in common. That doesn't mean you're gay. There's no such thing as a gay gene. And trust me, I know the girl right now, and she's well on her way to being married. But she just needed someone to speak that truth, right? And I do want to encourage each and every one of you to get Leila's book and to read it and maybe memorize one-liners. Now, I'm going to move forward just a little bit because I got lots of other questions here. How about this? Again, a teenager might use the argument with you that you can't force your Catholic views on others, or you can't force the law, or that people love each other and should be able to get married, even if they are the same sex. How would you use reason to answer that question?
So there's a lot of different parts to that question. So let's start with the love part. So we could say, up until, again, 5 minutes ago, historically, love, a feeling of love, was never a prerequisite for valid marriage. When you go to get a marriage license, and to this day, you do not have to prove that you are in love. You do not have to sign anything on that marriage license that says we have romantic feelings for each other and we're feeling no. They just want to know if you're free to marry, if you have no other spouse and if you're of a certain age and, meet those requirements. The idea that we marry whoever we love doesn't make any sense, because we love lots of people. I mean, I love my mom, I love my friend, I love my neighbors. I've loved a few boyfriends in my day. I didn't marry each one of them. You don't marry someone simply because I feel love. That means I have a right, or I should marry that person. That's never been what marriage was for. Never been the definition or an essential of marriage. Don't get me wrong. We want you to be in love when you're married. We want you to feel, ideally, you would have these wonderful feelings, which, by the way, come and go. We need to teach our kids that too. It's like, just because your feelings go away for a while, if you're married, doesn't mean you're not married. There's another thing, right? When love goes away, does that mean we're suddenly unmarried? Of course not. So love as an essential to what is marriage in its essence, that feeling of love was never part of that. I tell the story of my grandparents who are from the old country. I'm half Arab, and they got married with the bishop, because there's a lot of Christian Arabs, as we know. The bishop, and then they went on and had 5 kids and 14 grandkids, and those are my grandparents. They barely knew each other when they got married. They were married. I remember celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. So the idea that love is the essence of all marriage. No. Love is the essence of all relationships, sure, and between God and us, but it's not the essence of what makes a marriage a marriage. So we have to really back up and talk to our teenagers and really just say, let's just look at it. You said something. What was the first part of what you said? Now I need to back up and.
Well, you can't force Catholic views on people.
Thank you. So you can't force Catholic views. In matters of the creed, in matters of divine revelation, things like the sacraments or the Marian doctrines or the different things, right? You cannot legislate or force someone to go to mass, right? That's off limits. That is Catholics are required to go to mass on Sundays. Non-Catholics are not required by the moral law to go to mass on Sundays. What are all people required to do? To follow the natural law. What is the natural law? That's the thing that is, again, the universal moral law that applies to all human beings, whether they're atheists or the highest saint. And that is, you can't kill people. Okay. That is that marriage is what it is because it's in nature. It's in nature that a man and a woman are like a lock and a key. They fit together. The two parts of the reproductive system aren't even complete without each other. It's the only system in the body that has another half. Okay, this is all based in even science. It's based in creation. So marriage is something that is universal. That's why you have it in China, where they hate religion. You know, they don't have mass in China that's known as good and wonderful, and that's what we do. They'd like to outlaw that, and they have, because that's a religious Catholic thing. But they do have natural marriage. Why? Because even atheists see that natural marriage has always been a universal thing that builds a society. So again, we're not imposing natural law. You can't impose natural moral law on people because everyone's required and sees it and has it in their heart anyway. You can't steal, you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't beat people up, you can't rape people, and marriage is a thing, and life is inviolable. I mean, all these things are written on the hearts of every human being, and they can all get to it through the light of human reason. That's not imposing the Catholic faith. That's saying this is how nature is. This is how we were made, and this is how human beings have always acted and always understood things until, again, 5 seconds ago, historically, when subjective things came in to supplant the truth.
And so I've got a lot more questions here, so I'm going to keep on moving forward. But do you have any advice, let's say, for moms who have all of the truth within their hearts and their souls, and they're convicted along all of these lines, but they don't have the gift of speaking about it the way perhaps that you do. And so there's this chasm between themselves and their youth. So if someone doesn't have the verbal skills, maybe to take their teenager on, or like, do you have any suggestions for moms maybe that aren't as confident verbally as maybe you are?
Well, I would first say that confidence is a muscle that we have to practice, because if we can't be confident, or at least fake it. I'm big on faking it. Fake it and then have a breakdown later. Go to your room and cry and, fall apart. But when you're with other people, whether it's your neighbor, your child, your husband, whoever, who is of a different mind, you have to be able to at least speak the basic truths. It doesn't have to be, a big treatise on anything. You don't have to be a theologian.
I guess that's where your book would come in really handy, right?
That's why we wrote it. We wrote it because we're like, look, this is so simple when it comes down to its essence. But the big ingredient that's missing usually is confidence and courage. And if you don't have that confidence and courage yourself, you will never expect a teenager to stand up to his classmates, or social, shaming. How can they do it if the adults can't do it? So we have to get back to understanding, and this is through prayer. Obviously, you must pray for confidence, because, if we're asked to be even martyrs at some point, surely we should be able to stand a little social shame if someone mocks us. Let's say we don't, this is not how God made people, or this is not even how nature made people to do this or that. If we can't stand a little pushback, how are we going to be martyred one day if called to, right? So we've got to do it. If you have younger children, start by letting them read The Emperor's New Clothes. That book right there will show that even though everyone else denies the obvious, a little child can still see it and go, well, that looks like he doesn't have any clothes on. You go back to the fables with the little kids and let them understand the foundation of things to begin with. And it'll be easier for them to say, this doesn't make sense. Everybody's saying that a man can be a woman, but I know that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in science and in philosophy and reality. So start them with these, especially The Emperor's New Clothes. Start them to understand that truth matters. Truth and what we know through our senses is real. Feelings, you shouldn't really rely on feelings for everything, because feelings change every day, and you can be manipulated quite easily with feelings and emotions. And that's where the devil is going to get us, in our emotions. Start with truth, start with reality, and then let your emotions kind of be subordinate. And the church teaches this, and we don't teach this to our kids anymore. That our emotions must be subordinate to our intellect and our will. So we have to know what we know. We have to know the truth, reality, this is the desk, I'm a girl, and then we apply our will, maybe I don't want to believe that. Maybe I'm feeling, nope. You want to go with God's will, how he created things, you apply the will. The emotions are subordinate to all that. Unfortunately, what we have is that, and especially our teenagers and any younger generation, they literally have been taught that if you feel something, that is true. That is literally what society teaches them. So we're fighting this battle of madness. They've been taught madness, and we've got to get them back to what is true, what is concrete, what is real. And it's tough. So that's why start young when they're little. But if you have teens, we've got to start pulling them back and start saying, look, let's just evaluate, should we let our feelings rule everything and lead us to truth? And what happens when our feelings change?
Yeah. And
where does that leave us?
Yeah, no, a little trick that I don't know if it'll be useful or handy to any of the moms here, but sometimes, I used to say to my kids, well, look, I don't really feel like cooking. I don't ever feel like cooking. So I guess we'll just never have supper again, because I don't really feel like going grocery shopping either. And really, you know what? I feel like just selling this house and taking all the money and going to Hawaii. And their little faces were just like, we can't rely strictly on our feelings. We've got to do with what is right. And so sometimes having those conversations in a very simple way, or sometimes my kids would say to me, but everybody else is going to that party, or everybody else is watching that movie. Why can't I? I sometimes would say, well, like a lot of moms I know are getting divorced. So maybe I should get divorced since everyone else is doing it. And then you could go, and they would and so sometimes just having, not abusive confrontational conversation, but like making them a little bit fun loving, using reason to help kids see that maybe some of the things they're saying are being a little bit ridiculous. Now, I want to move on to transgender identity. But before talking about transgender identity, I wanted, Tanya, who's helped prepare for this, it was suggesting that we take a look and differentiate between the sex of a person and the gender of a person. And like some people don't even know that there's a difference between the sex and the gender, and what is the gender. And we've almost come to, put gender as almost like a false god. Can you talk briefly, outline the difference between those two?
Yeah, people get very confused, and I'm gonna, sex is the biological sex of the person. So male, female. There are a few people in the world who are intersex, which has a little bit of, a congenital issue, but again, it's based in science, in the flesh, in the chromosomes. But either way, even then science can get to the fact and say, well, this person, even though they have maybe different two sex characteristics, we know this is actually a female. So there's two sexes. It's how God created it, male and female. Gender is a construct. Gender is something that does not actually apply to humans. It never has. It's applied to language, like gendered language, like the French language. The first time it was applied to humans was by Dr. John Money, and he was a sexologist, actually a horrible man, who you can look him up on Wikipedia. I don't care where. There are videos about what he did to children. Very horrible man. He was the first to say that there are gender roles and gender things about people that are more societally based. And again, we're more subjective.
What's his name again?
Dr. John Money, Money.
Okay.
There are documentaries. It is scary. It is frightening what he did to a set of twin boys, one of whom had a botched circumcision. He said, now we have got a subject. We can raise this little boy as a girl. Well, that little boy ended up growing up and he ended up committing suicide, and his brother ended up dying of a drug overdose. He was a pervert, actually, and he made them do sexual things. This is the guy that came up with gender, which actually has no basis in science or in reality. Gender is a construct that they use to say, well, that's how we feel about ourselves. That's our identity. That's how we have, our thoughts about our sex or our sexuality. We may be biologically one way, but we feel and we know that we're really something else in our identity. Now, I have asked this question of so many people. Show me where gender exists outside of the imagination. Nobody can answer that. It is an imaginary thing, and they will admit that it's a construct. So, but we have based everything now based on gender identity, meaning we based everything on what's in a kid's or a person's imagination. And we make laws about it now, and we silence people because they say, what do you, I have to now call you a pronoun that's not true. And that makes me a liar if I say that you're a he when you're really a she. And I can't lie because that's my faith, right? I'm not allowed to lie. We need to tell our children, you go back to first principles. You can't lie. You can be kind and gentle and good to people, but they can't make you lie, because that makes you sin. You're then a sinner, right? They can sin if they want, but it's now imposing on the Catholic or the Christian or just the reasonable thinker, saying you have to do what we say, you have to say what we want you to say, even if it's a lie. Well, again, you can almost sense Satan in this, the father of lies. You got to say what I say is true, even though you know it's not true. That's not what Catholics do, right? So we're in rocky ground here. It's very tricky, but there is only biological sex that is something that is real, that is concrete. And gender is a construct. And even gender identity ideologues will admit it is a social construct, but they want everything to be based on that.
Well,
So.
And it really is diabolical, and what really scares me more than anything. And I know that, we've got it here listed in the questions or the comments, that if we sort of, as Catholics, sit back and let this transgender ideology take further root, and we don't, stand up and fight the good fight and teach the truth in our homes, is there a possibility in your mind, if we just like sort of sit and watch it and allow it, that we could lose what it means to be a father? We could lose what it means to be a mother. And it's just like, I went to a hospital once, and it asked, what gender I was, and it was a Catholic hospital, and there were, I don't know, 20 different options. And like, so I'm like, so does that mean now I am no longer like the mother of my child because of all, like, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, if we just allow this to, it's like we're brokering children, and that children have become commodities that anyone can take care of, and that the true mother and the true father are just kind of like, it scares the living daylights out of me.
It's not just a consequence of it. It is actually the goal of it is to get rid of motherhood and fatherhood. It actually is. And even JP2 said the whole goal of Satan in original sin was to get rid of the fatherhood of God. Because if you get rid of the fatherhood of God, then you separate humanity from God, and then we go to hell. So when JP2 said that, you got to remember, in the garden, if God created male and female, that means he also created mothers and fathers. If we're genderless, if we're fluid, if none of that matters anymore, there is no God, there's no relationship, there's no fatherhood. You can get rid of fatherhood on the earth. That's going to translate to getting rid of fatherhood of God. So this is actually the goal of Satan, is to get rid of, the sexes, to get rid of it and to blur it and to make it all one big amalgamous thing. If you look at even now they're not saying mothers anymore, even in America, some of the senators or whatever, they're saying birthing people. So notice how utilitarian that is. It's like, it's a person or a body that's giving birth. It's not a mother anymore. Mother is like the Blessed Mother. That's a relationship we have. That's a specific gift, of motherhood. It means something to a child. And then if you just say birthing person, how is that different than like, a combine, an engine? It's just something that is a thing that does a thing.
Yeah.
You take away, and that's what they want, right? It's on birth certificates now in certain states or different places where it's like, parent one, parent two. If you are genderless, I always go back to this, they want to create a genderless society. And I don't like that word, because again, genderless, a sexless society is really what it should be. But if there's androgyny, which is the goal is just everybody is androgynous. There's a reason. I always come back to, if any of you have seen The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson, the Satan figure is androgynous. Why does he make the Satan figure androgynous? Because it unsettles us as human beings. We are unsettled when we do not know whether that person is a male or a female. We are the male and female. it's the first thing we notice about a person and the last thing we forget. If we are in a store and we talk to a clerk, we may not remember the name, what they're wearing, their hair color, their height. We will remember whether we talk to a man or a woman. That is so innate in us as humans. And they want to eradicate that altogether. And it is satanic, and it is about getting rid of mothers and fathers. It's about getting rid of daughters and sons and aunts and uncles. It's about getting rid of human relationships as God created them in a family. So you're not wrong.
No, and again, this is, I have to be careful because I can go on very passionate tangents, and I just have a few minutes left with you. So a mom asked, what should she do when her 7-year-old says he wants to dress up as a girl? What should parents do in this situation?
Mm-hmm. So, and that comes back to the irony of that the same people who want to get rid of the sexes will say, well, if your son wants to wear pink and wear a dress and have long hair, that must mean you may want to explore that he is really a girl. Well, it's like, I thought that was all just, we don't do gender roles. We don't do that. Like, a boy can play with dolls and a girl can play with trucks. I thought we didn't do that. But all of a sudden, it's the most important thing. Well, he's wearing pink and he wants to wear nail polish and, oh, I bet he's a girl. It's like, well, which is it? Pick one. It either is important or it's not. So I would just say this, you see what I mean? It's always, but that's Satan again, the confusion and the chaos. It doesn't ever make sense. If a boy is overly effeminate or feminine, I would say, because effeminate has a whole other, St. Thomas Aquinas has a whole other meaning for effeminacy. If a boy wants to be more feminine, to a certain extent, big deal. It doesn't make him not a boy. We've never said before that just because a guy likes to dance or something, as a kid or twirl or whatever. We've never said, well, that's not a boy. That's not a boy. Okay, he likes to dance, he likes to twirl. If it goes to a point where it seems very feminine, like that, okay, people are going to go, that's not boy-like at all. Like, and I had 1 or 2 boys of my own. I have 6 boys and 2 girls. One, a couple of them, I'm like, wait, that's weird. They're kind of acting very feminine. You just redirect the kid. You want the kid to be well-adjusted. If a kid is a male, you want the child to be masculine in the end, because masculinity is a perfection and femininity is a perfection. It's what God wants. It can be seen in many different ways, but we still want men to be masculine and women to be feminine. So you would say, and there's nothing wrong with this. They'll tell you there's something wrong with this. I would tell my son, okay, honey, you know what? You're talking, you're doing this kind of high pitch, whatever. I said, bring your voice down. Boys don't need to squeal like a girl or whatever. I just say that. I don't care. I don't care what my child is going to, guess what? He's 12 now, or, he's, one of them is actually even an adult with a wife. But totally all male now. Never had a problem. Oh, okay. Just kind of redirect. So if your son wants to wear a dress, personally, in this culture, it's never been that boys wear dresses. I might be in Scotland that they wear a kilt. That's their regional thing. Here it's associated with being a girl, right? Femininity. So you know what? Boys don't wear dresses. We don't wear dresses. Okay. Then they wear something else. Unless you're pushing them towards it. And a lot of times it's the mom who is encouraging this because we're more emotional. We feel more. We don't want our children to be hurt. We don't want our children to feel bad. So we go along with what they want. No, just say, you know what? In the same way we can say to our daughters, it's okay to sit like a lady, sit like a lady. We could say to our boys, you know what? Don't move your hands like this all the time, kind of keep your hands in your control because you're a guy. It's totally fine to do that. And guess what? It actually works. It actually works. And you don't have to transition them and then, later mutilate their genitals in order to.
Just a quick little story. Again, I was born in Poland, raised by 2 Polish parents, and we traveled. We went to Poland on a number of occasions. And I did notice in Poland that the Polish male was different than the North American male, right? The North American male, is very, very much, driven towards football, towards hockey, towards very aggressive sports. And in Poland, a lot of, the sports are more like tennis and maybe soccer. And so in Poland, it wouldn't be unusual for a male while we're on a hike to come up to me and stroke my head and say, hey, look, it looks like you're hurting. It looks like this is too difficult. And I remember the first couple of times I traveled to Poland and I had these extremely empathetic, caring males. I was kind of a little bit, and so I was a little bit startled. And then you've got the sort of North American male. And I know that there was a doctor, I think his name was Fitzgibbons for a while. He was doing some work with males that weren't the football players, that weren't the hockey players, but that they were the chefs and they were the musicians, and they were a more effeminate version of a male, but they weren't considered that they weren't men, Right. And so I also like moms to I know that when I married the husband that I have, who is a Canadian who drove, our son and daughter into hockey, ringette, and I had a natural aversion to it because my dad was a church organist. My dad played the balalaika. My dad was the gentlest soul in the family. So to distinguish between the men of the finer arts versus someone that's gay. And I think that sometimes men think that just because they're painters or chefs or guitarists, that they're gay. And so that to me is another thing that's very important, I think, for moms to distinguish and not maybe to condemn the son that likes to cook,
Exactly. And I need to make that distinction. There are more sensitive boys and there are more rough boys, and that's fine. That's just a variation of what boys are. It doesn't matter. What I'm talking about more is that if a boy takes on the affect of a female, an affect, I'm going to paint my nails and I'm going to and I'm going to speak a certain way, and you can redirect those more feminine traits, and they can still be a musician and we want our boys to be virtuous, which means compassionate and kind, and they're never going to be women in their intuitiveness and all that. Men, no matter what their temperament and no matter what their disposition and personality, whether they're more gentle and sensitive, they're still hardwired to be the protectors and the providers. That's the difference. Yes. Women are the nurturers. We're the life bearers. We're the more intuitive ones. We're the more relational ones. When Adam and Eve were created, I love this. Adam, the first thing he saw were the goods of the earth. Men are builders. They build, whether it's a symphony or a building or the roads. Who's still building the roads? It's still the guys, right? There's no girls aren't out there building roads and skyscrapers. Very rarely do you find that in a construction crew, right? It's usually and the deadly jobs are still the men. They protect and provide. What did Eve see when she first had her view of creation? When she was created, she saw all the goods of the earth too, but she also saw a person. She saw Adam. We are relational. We're the ones who we relate to the other human beings around us, where the men are doing more of the goods of the earth. They're building cities. They're trying to stay on task and protect their families. So we are different, even when our temperaments are, we want nurturing men, but it's in a different way, and their constitutions are different. Men and women are different by design, and it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
So.
And, I don't know if you saw the movie, and I guess just a shout out to all moms. And it just, the movie made me so angry. The movie Palmer, and it's a story about a convict who befriends a young boy who is being raised by a drug addict, alcoholic mother. And that young boy starts to, dress up as a girl, and, so on and so forth, because the alcoholic and drug addicted mother starts buying this boy princess items and so on and so forth. And so when this convict becomes friends with this young boy, one kind of thinks that maybe maybe the ex-convict is going to somehow help the young boy discover his masculinity, but instead it's a godless movie. And so then the ex-convict reinforces all of the constructs built in the mind of the young boy. And the fact that he was risen by, being risen by this drug-infested, alcoholic, drug-addicted mother that's being beaten in a trailer, the young boy is affirmed, and it's so tragic because the movie it's a brilliant movie, but it's a godless movie. And because it's a godless movie, there's no hope for the child. Right? There's no, and it's on Netflix, and it infuriates me that God isn't introduced as a part of the movie. And again, one of my famous tangents. I'm sorry. I promised.
Well, it's a missed opportunity, right? Every
time.
Yeah,
it's a missed opportunity.
We're missing the point. We're kind of off the reservation here, going off in directions that the movie could take it to a redemption, but instead it just reaffirms disorder. And I love. You guys, if there's a way that you can raise your children, right and wrong is a very good way to raise, to use terms right and wrong, because we need basic things. But order and disorder seems to really resonate too. Like if things are orderly, if we follow a certain order that God has placed in the world, we have peace. Like everybody just wants peace, right? And peace comes from the tranquility of order. And that, gosh, I can't remember which saint said that, but that's not me. Peace comes from the tranquility of order. And we have to have order in our souls, just as God ordered the world. And so if we can start to say to our kids, well, this, you don't want to do this because that would be, that's disordered. And if something is disordered, it's going to give you chaos. It's going to make you feel bad. Even if at first it makes you feel good because there's maybe a feeling attached to it. If things are disordered, it's chaotic. And, that's why we see, again, the disordered, your teens can look around and see their peers and they'll say, these aren't happy people. They're committing suicide at an all-time high. They're anxious, they're depressed, they're broken in so many different ways. They don't even know if they're a boy or girl. This is not peaceful. Yeah. And by continuing down a path of disorder, it's not going to make them peaceful. It's actually going to make things worse. So, make the teenagers can kind of see that intuitively. So we have to, again, I'm kind of being on a tangent here, but I'm just saying, let's think in terms of order and disorder, and then we can understand where peace could come.
Okay, now, a lot of our kids, and I know that, I've got 2 adult children, 25 and 27, and just through the word, they're observing, they're observing people transitioning, right? What do we say? Like sometimes parents don't say anything because they don't know what to say, but our children are seeing it. And if nothing is being said, that's a problem as well. So how would you handle those situations where we're observing people who are transitioning?
Yeah, it's, and that's happening everywhere, and they're seeing their friends. They're seeing people. If they're confused about it, one thing I would say is you always have to present, first of all, compassion. We want to be compassionate with everybody. Nobody is saying that we hate these people. These are terrible people. We don't know what kind of horror, goes on and lives inside them. And they are very confused. And there is maybe brokenness in their lives, or maybe it's just a social contagion. So we don't judge their hearts and souls. We pull back and we say, what is true? What is real? And we do go back to science. We do go back to, reality. If we don't start with reality, we end up again in chaos. So one thing that I think would resonate with teenagers now, and it's not even in the book because I just saw this the other day. What kids do see is that acceptance is everything. People are so unmoored from anything. There's no firm foundations anymore. There's no truth anymore. So they're very confused to begin with. And then they want to belong because that's natural. So they find these communities, especially online, which are telling them they can belong, they can be accepted. And really, they aren't being accepted as who they are. But if they do the right things and say the right things and play the right card, like I'm a victim here, but I'm not if I'm this, so I have to become a victim so that I can be accepted. Otherwise, I'm an oppressor. Kids will kind of glom on to whatever their peers are saying they need. There's a woman, I want everybody, if possible, please, this is so important. I couldn't believe what I was learning. Her name is Helena Kirshner, and it's Kerschner, Helena Kirshner. She shared her story of transitioning to being a boy and then coming back, and now she's back to being a woman. She's 24 now, I think. She explains what happened. A lot of it happens on social media. The way that the mind can be brought into this non-reality is so frightening, but every parent needs to understand how this happens, because it is about taking them away from the reality of like actual firm, trees and ground and dirt and air and tables and chairs, and brings them into this virtual world where everything is in the imagination. And that then plays on them. It's very diabolical in one sense. Michael Knowles, he's with Daily Wire, but Michael Knowles, he's a Catholic. The Michael Knowles show interviewed her, and this is maybe a month ago. Go on YouTube and find Helena's detransitioning story on Michael Knowles. She's so intelligent. She tells it like it happened to her. Planned Parenthood is now in the business of giving injections, testosterone injections, to young women who want them. That's their new moneymaker, right? They are always on, whatever is going to make money and ruin people and ruin lives. She tells her story and how it happened, and even her parents were against it. Didn't matter. You have to know why this happens. And it would be something to watch with your teenagers and say, does this happen? Like, does this seem familiar to you? If you're online a lot, you could ask your teenagers that. So there's all sorts of things we can do, but we have to educate ourselves as to why is this happening in the first place? And it is actually something most parents aren't watching. They're not seeing what's happening when their kids are online and this social transitioning is happening. And so again, ground them in reality. If they're teens already, it might be rough to pull them back, but you cannot go along with it. You cannot just say, okay, well, I love you and I don't want to lose you. You have to be like the prodigal father kind of, or the prodigal mother who's like, I love you. I will never stop loving you. I will always be here for you. I can't go along with something that I think harms you. Again, mothers, it's kind of like if our children were cutting, if they were cutting and they're having cutting parties, let's say, or if they're a stripper, would we ever say, or if they're shooting up drugs, would we ever say, oh, I'm going to support you in this. I love who you are. And if this makes you happy, I'm going to do, we don't do it. We can't do it. So it might cause a rift. It might be that we are estranged, even if the child doesn't want to still be a part of our lives, even though we've said, we'll still be a part of your life. We love you, but we're never going to be okay with something that harms you.
Yeah, and it's so important too, if you can, to have a spiritual director, because, I know that our family received an invitation to a, same-sex wedding, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how do you handle this? I'm so, I'm like the Catholic loving lady, right? And in speaking with my spiritual director, it just became very clear that I had to say, no, we can't attend. And so sometimes, it does require some spiritual direction. It does require some courage. I do want to respect your time, and I know that we've gone over your time, and I still have a lot more questions here, which I'm kind of, how much more time do I have? Because I've got one or two for sure questions I'd like to ask, but I don't want to take advantage of your time as well.
I have about 10 more minutes. I told people to get out of the house, and I know that they're going to be coming back. I got one upstairs who I can tell is kind of walking around, but I have, he's
okay.
He's
So,
adult, but he's like, but yeah, 10 minutes maybe. And
okay,
then I'm always happy
we've gone over, and I encourage
No.
everyone here, like, let's invite Leila to Canada to speak. I figure there's enough mothers groups even in the Archdiocese of Toronto for you to go parish hopping. Let's take a look at doing that, because there's questions that are coming up even in the chat that I haven't addressed. But I do want to, take a look at homosexuality, and I guess it's important to distinguish between attraction and behavior, right? Can you just say a little bit about that?
So yes, so we know that temptations are not sins, and we know that again, that's why we put our emotions and our feelings subordinate to our intellect and our will. You can have temptations, and those are, and they can be either temptations that are ordered, naturally ordered, like I'm going to have an affair with another man. That's a bad thing, but it's still naturally ordered, like male, female is a natural order. Or you could have temptations that are disordered, which is why, again, I go into order and disorder. It's not ordered even to have a temptation to have a homosexual encounter. That's not ordered according to God's creation. However, it's still only a temptation. It's not a sin. It's not anything you can necessarily even control. You just would not want to indulge those temptations, either in thought, like by enjoying them or inviting them in, or by obviously acting on them. Now, once you cross the line into accepting the temptation and inviting it and saying, yep, I'm going to go with this, even in my mind, or even in, as long as you're, again, people don't need to make themselves crazy, but as long as they're like, nope, I don't consent to that. I don't like that thought. That's one thing. But the minute that we act on it, whether in thought, where we're like, yep, I like this temptation and I'm going to go with it, I'm going to indulge it, or in action, then you've crossed into the line of choice, right? Then you've made the choice. And once you make a choice, that's where we are moral agents. We are moral agents. We can choose to do the right thing, or we can choose to do the wrong thing. Actions, choices, thoughts that we approve of and want, those are choices. That's when we get into the realm of sin. So if your child says, I don't know, I think I'm gay. And again, I want to go back to this idea that you don't ever overreact. There's no need to overreact to anything. And your kid will never, ever, ever approach you again, and only will go to peers or the internet or bad people if you one time make it so awful for them that they're not going to come back. So, and if you've done it in the past, apologize. Go right now and apologize to your kids. Say, I'm sorry, I overreacted. I don't want to be that person. But the child comes to you and says, I think I'm gay. I don't know what to, okay, well, give them a big hug, okay, tell me why you think that. Why do you think you're gay? What do you think that even means? And what do you think God would want you to do in this situation? And let's talk about it. And let me get you some more information and let me help you. You want to be their ally, but not in the way the LGBTQ community considers an ally, which means affirm, affirm, affirm. But you want to be their best cheerleader for what is right and what is good for them and what is ordered for them. So hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your child that they trust you, and then they will listen to what you're saying. If not, you can't be the savior to other people. Christ is the savior, right? So you might have to detach. If that child wants to go that way, you might have to detach, especially if they're adults. If they're still minors, heck, I'd try everything. I'd take away social media for a time. I would try to get to talk to a good holy priest. There's lots of things you could try to do, get them into nature and talk about other things, but and teach them about the truths of the faith. But if you have an adult who's going in that direction, I saw one of the questions on the side was something like that. There may come a time where you have to detach emotionally and say, I love this child. I'm going to keep praying for this child. I'm sorry if you're hearing that ding. I don't know why this won't stop. It will not stop, and I've turned everything off. Oh my goodness. But you may have to detach, and that's okay, because I love St. Teresa of Avila. Patience obtains all things. That's like my new favorite quote. Patience obtains all things. We don't know what the future holds, but you love that child. You may not be able to have them in your home with their same-sex partner, because you may have other children and you may not want to influence them. Doesn't mean you don't love them. If that child makes it difficult for you and makes it seem like, well, you're hateful, you're terrible, it's like, no, I love you. You want me to respect what you're doing and what your beliefs are. I also deserve that respect. I'm Catholic, so that means I have my set of beliefs too. So let's let that respect go both ways. And you have to respect my views and that I hold these, deeply held views. And if you want me to respect that you also have your own mind, it can't just be this, only the mom or the dad have to cave in to what the kid wants. That's called emotional blackmail. Actually, that's emotional manipulation. So
Yeah,
anyway, I may have gone on a tangent there.
No, you didn't. You didn't. And it's just very, very refreshing to speak with you. And I'm very grateful. I guess just in closing this, last question, like right now we're living in this culture where, not only like we're expected, there's all this pressure to celebrate homosexuality, right? We see it in Disney, we see it in our banks, that they've got, I don't know why they have to have, what do they do? Have special bank accounts, they put the rainbow flag there. And, but the thing that I've been getting a lot of messages from Catholic moms, and I don't know how to respond sometimes. That's why I have you on the program. So I'm grateful that you're here. But a lot of Catholic mothers have approached me because right now in Canada, in our area, there are many Catholic schools that are displaying the pride flag. And so on the one hand, we live in this culture, and even our Catholic schools are promoting this. What can a mother do in order, and does she have a duty to do something in order to kind of be a warrior? Like, did you shut your blind eye? Like just very recently, a YouTube video has been put out by a Catholic priest, celebrating Pride Month, a Catholic priest. And so, one thing that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, or pet peeve rather, is that mothers seem to have lost their authority, and their confidence. And can you talk a little bit more about maybe what moms need to do in these situations, especially with the flag, if their kid is going to that school, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I'm kind of a hard liner on that. I mean, if there's something in a school like that, I don't want my kid in that school. I mean, I've had to do that before. This is, and again, I'm so sorry about that dinging. I'm trying everything to make it stop. The thing, it kind of hits on maybe similar to what Catherine is asking in the chat, because she said, how basically, like, how far do we go along with this stuff, and what can we do to stop it? I'm a real hard liner. We have to save our own souls. We're responsible for our own souls before even the souls of our children. And if we go along with all of this stuff, and it is how the devil is getting our children, and if we're too afraid to say anything because we might get in trouble, or we might, who are we? I mean, I have to save my own soul first. Obviously, God saves my soul, but you know what I mean? I'm more responsible first for my own, and then for my husband, for my children. So the idea that we would go along even a little bit with things that are purely evil, that are actually destroying our children's souls and their ability to go to heaven. Because I think in the book we say, what is the worst thing in the world? The worst thing in the world is not getting to heaven. That's the worst thing in the world, because that's irreparable. So I noticed, and again, I don't want me to go on a tangent. I think it's kind of related, where Catherine says, in the chat here, that she wants to leave the door open, or that we need to have these dialogues, like either with our children, or maybe with the school, or maybe with the teacher, who knows. And a lot of people say because depression or suicide would be something that sets in. The devil always wants you to be afraid. That's his tactic now. Fear, 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 fear. And the biggest thing I tell people all the time now, fear of suicide is the biggest fear that LGBT uses now. That's how they do the court cases. They're like, the judge will say to the father, you can't use this, you can't use the right, you can't call your daughter a girl anymore. You have to say she's a he, because otherwise you're putting your child in danger, because she's going to commit suicide. I know people in exorcisms who are people who've, been in the prayer position of in an exorcism, where that's what the devils will say. They'll pop out and they'll say, I'm going to make her commit suicide. I'm going to make her commit suicide. we cannot act on fear like that. We have to speak truth no matter what happens. No matter what happens, it's not up to us. We cannot force an outcome. We have to speak the truth in the moment. We have to do the good in the moment and let God take care of the outcomes. And maybe the outcome is that something terrible happens, but it's not going to touch our soul, right? Maybe we get thrown in jail. Maybe we get, I don't know, but it's not going to touch our soul. The worst thing is if something destroys our soul. So we can do things out of fear that our kids are going to kill themselves or that there's going to be some horrible repercussion at the school. But then we're just one step down the line of not being able to stand up to the next thing because you know the next thing is coming. This is not going to stop. And that's the big lie is that, well, we appease. We're going to appease it because if we just do this little bit of giving in to evil, then it'll stop. It'll stop and everything will be okay. And that's the big lie, because what does the devil do? Read St. Ignatius rule number 12. The devil, when confronted with weakness, becomes more ferocious. The devil, when confronted with strength, retreats. So if the devil is in front of you, you don't go looking for the devil. You're not going to seek him out. You don't engage the enemy. But if it's brought to you or your children, you don't react with weakness. You react with strength. It's like, not in my house, not in my, Satan, you're not having your day. And you stand firm, you're kind, you're always reasonable, and you're always compassionate. But you do not say, I'm going to give in because I'm afraid, because he will come after you the next time more ferociously. We have learned that evil is not appeased. You cannot appease the devil. He'll eat you. He'll come back and eat you alive. So
So
yes,
so I'm getting goosebumps here. I feel like I have I just feel like I found a very good friend in you. Thank you, because
we're Catholic, right? This is what we do. Like we need to be strong for each other. We're moms. We are mama bears. Nobody is, guys, look up in the Bible. There is the Maccabee mother. She tells her 7 sons, she watches them all be martyred. And you know what she says? Do it. You gotta die for God. You don't humiliate and shame your whole, your mother. I raised you to love God, and now you're going to save your skin? No. I want you to do the right thing, even to death, so that we can all be together, in the end. That's a mom. I mean, I'm not that strong. I am not that strong, but she is strong. And that's kind of what we're called to be is.
And I guess it's not often I'm speechless, but I'm just very, very grateful to have found you. And I really look forward to having you in Toronto, Canada, so that more moms can hear you, because your voice is so incredibly needed. And I have often just felt that, Satan has attacked moms in a very specific way, because right now mothers are sort of obsessed about, okay, I want to become fit. I want to become healthy. I want to have a beautiful Instagram account. I want to have an incredible profession. I want to have a beautiful house. I want to travel internationally. I want to have, the best sex life in the world. I want to have the most wonderful car. And sometimes Satan has made us so busy in doing all of these other things, let me go get my master's and my second master's, and that sometimes we have forgotten that we have duties as mothers, and we are going to be judged based on the effort that we had made to raise godly children. And I'm going to close with this. Can you just make some comment about, I was looking for someone to do a little bit of writing for the ministry on the duties of a mom, and a lot of writers, good Catholic writers, are saying, don't talk to me about duties. That triggers me. Don't make me feel guilty. That triggers me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was raised by a Catholic mom who said, you have a duty to make sure that there's a hot supper on the table. And, you have a duty to bring your children to mass every Sunday. Like I was raised by a dutiful mother. No going to a fitness club if I didn't serve dinner, right? So anyway, just can you make some comments on that in closing?
Yes. This hit me like a ton of bricks when I realized this, that like you said, we, at our particular judgment, when we meet God and there will be no one there to advocate for us, it's just us and God, one person and God. When we meet God at our particular judgment, we will be judged on how well we were obedient and attentive to the duties of our state in life. Meaning a priest will be judged on how well he was a priest, on how well he did. A religious sister will be judged on how well she was in obeying her rule, and her order or whatever. Mothers and fathers will be judged on how they were in their vocation. So it doesn't matter if I have a successful business and I'm all, traveling and getting pictures. I will be judged on how was I a good wife? Was I a good mother? And good meaning, did I do the right things? Was I virtuous? Did I help my husband and my children get to heaven? Is that what I did? It's like Mary. Mary's our model. She lived a hidden life. Her whole life was about taking care to be a good wife and a good mother. And that's what she did. And that's how we are all judged on our state in life. So all the other stuff doesn't matter. It's going to mean nothing. It's going to burn away the minute that we face God. So people don't like to hear that because we're modern women. We don't want to hear it. But even that document, the document that I told you about, the truth and meaning of human sexuality, that I said to print it up, and it's mentioned in the book also, so it's there, but you can get it online anywhere. The times I highlighted the words obligation and duty came up again and again and again. This is our obligation. It is our duty. And those words had better come back to our vocabulary as Catholics. I think our bishops have forgotten. Our bishops are weak. I'm sorry. Canada, America, we have very weak leaders. They have forgotten their obligations and their duties to get us to heaven, to help us get to heaven. And the same with parents in the family, and same with mothers.
Yeah, and when my daughter was getting prepared for her first Holy Communion at school, they refused to use the word sin because they said that, it's good choices and bad choices. And I said, no. A good choice and a bad choice might be between using a jacket and a sweater, but a sin offends God and leads, and so, I just beg mothers not to be too busy to be mothers, because in order to have these conversations, in order to be that coach, I always say that now being a coach is a profession because most adults weren't parented. So now they need coaches. Anyway, I wanted to thank you. I just wanted to thank you so much for your time today. We've got so many comments here in the, we just don't have time to answer all of these questions and all of these comments. We've done our best to cover as many different, I encourage you, if people want to buy the book, where do they get the book? That's where, where can they get the book?
So Amazon is one place. There's Catholic Answers set up a website. It's madethiswaybook.com. And that way, I hope it still is the same in Canada, but you can get 20 books for $5 each. I mean, it's basically at cost. It's very cheap. So if there's like a mom's group or something, they can, or teachers at a Catholic school need this. Teachers don't know how to answer these questions. So you can get them for as little as $5 a piece. But madethiswaybook.com or Catholic Answers or Amazon is where you can get the book. Okay,
so you can be guaranteed, Leila, that I'll be following up with you, because I'd love to have you here in Canada. We do host an annual live Dynamic Women of Faith conference. Anyway, we need to talk a little bit more about that at a different time. Would love to have you back. I can just see from all of the chat, hear all the questions that are coming up. I also wanted to just publicly thank Tanya. She's one of our Mothers Group leaders. and she recommended you. She, you know, she created all the questions. She did a lot of hard work to make this day happen. And so Tanya, just big shout out to you. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for the questions. Really, really appreciate it. And yes, so thank you. And
Thank you all.
Yeah, we got a lot going on here. So we usually end with a song. I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes a time we have to say so long.
Carol Burnett.
That's the time I grew up in.
Same. I love Carol Burnett.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. Love you to pieces. I would ask each of you that is here today, number one, I'm going to ask you to do three things. Number one, pray a rosary for Leila and her family today. Pray a rosary for her. Can you please pray a rosary? Number two, would you please consider, you know, making a donation to our ministry? We need the donations. We're so stressed. And number three, buy at least 5 copies of this book. I find women like to complain instead of doing something. Buy a case of the book and hand them out to the school teacher, hand them out to your priest, hand them out to, you know, moms that you meet on the street. Like, just do something. We always make a call to action at the end of our mothers group meetups. We're not here just to have fun. We're not here just to feel good and be affirmed. I'm asking the Holy Spirit to convict you to do 3 things. Pray a rosary for Tanya. If you can, make a little donation, or, you know, and number 3, to buy, if you can't buy a case of books, surely you can afford 5 of them. Come on. Okay. Let's do something. Let's reclaim the culture. Let's reclaim our authority as a positive matriarch in our culture that isn't a wimp, it isn't afraid. I always say, remember, our Blessed Mother had the snake underfoot. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be in touch about having you in Canada. Okay. Talk to you later, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Take care.
Bye now.